Have you ever heard of a grief-cation? A grief-cation, um, or a vacation that is purposely organized for the purpose of processing grief. I saw this in a few places on YouTube and social media, and I thought that was an interesting question to be able to contemplate because I processed a lot of grief during my travels. If you don't know me, my name is Helena Black. I have lived abroad since 2018. I'm an American, and I've lived in 10 countries since then. Um, and I credit, excuse me, I credit my health and well-being to being able to travel and to be able to go to new places and to be able to experience new things. And so I wanted to be able to share um, what it is that I have gotten out of this. So before I actually moved abroad permanently from the US, I have taken sort of like short trips, short vacations, but I wouldn't call them griefcations. I'll give you the whole story. There were a few times when I was married when I got so fed up with my husband, my partner at the time, that if I did not get out of the house, I was just going to go crazy, right? So there were a couple of times that I organized just, I'm just going to get in the car and I'm going to drive off. So at the time I was living in Washington, D.C. And I think I'm thinking of places in particular. And then I went to, it was a beach in Delaware. I can't remember the name of it. The beach in Delaware, I think, they were both fun, but I think the beach in Delaware was my favorite because I went during the winter. And I went and I stayed at a bed and breakfast in this beautiful home. And it was actually in the dead of winter. And because it was the dead of winter, not a lot of people were going nobody goes to a beach town really in the dead of winter, but it is still open. There's, a few people that do live there. So I went there and I found really nice Airbnb. I stayed there. There was owned by a woman, and there was a couple of other women that were also there as guests. And it was this older home, and it was just so comfortable. It was, it was a bed and breakfast, so it wasn't like a hotel where, it was sort of, all the rooms were the same. All the rooms in this house were different, and it was the kind of place that it had this stair case going all the way up to like the third or fourth floor. And the steps were wood, and they would creak when you would walk up the steps. And then you go into the room, and it would, have this big, huge blanket on the bed, and it was just so comfortable, and it was warm. And it had the heating system. The place always felt toasty. And she would make us breakfast in the morning. It was this huge spread of, pancakes and waffles and bacon and eggs, toast and all, teas and coffee. And then in the evening, she would bring us, just a small plate of cookies. And then, she would ask if you wanted like milk with it or tea. And I would always get tea. I would get ginger tea with cookies, and it was so delicious. And the cookies were so soft and warm, and it was just the most gorgeous place. I loved it. And what I did was I would bring my stuff with me. So my stuff, meaning my art stuff. So I would, I wasn't painting really back then, but I had a thing for doing paint by numbers. And so I would bring my paint by numbers. Of course, I would bring my journals with me. I always had, at least a couple of different journals that that I was working in at the time. And yeah, I would just use that time to be able to decompress, Now, I was only there for a good weekend, maybe 2 or 3 days. And so, I would, we get the breakfast in the morning, we get the cookies at night, somewhere in the middle. I would, go out to a local restaurant. I think I went to the local seafood place, treated myself to that, and I would go for walks on this icy cold beach. And I find the beach to be really nice in the winter when nobody's there and it's just, seagulls outside and the waves are coming in and it's cold as hell. You need to be properly dressed. But I found that it was a really beautiful, I always found that it was a really beautiful place to be in the winter if you just want to be able to relax. I guess you can kind of call that sort of experience sort of a grief-cation. Um, if you've only got a couple of days, that's a nice way for you to be able um, to think about how it is that you want to be able to process your grief. Now, if I had more information about what this process actually was and what I was actually doing at the time, I just needed to be able to get away. I just needed to be able to go away and have some time to myself because I just hated being in the house that I was in at the time with my husband. Um, but then, of course, move forward a few years, and I've actually, I'm divorced by this time. I'm completely single. And I'm just looking for a way to be able to rearrange my life, my health, my well-being. And so in 2018, I left. I went to the United Arab Emirates, went there for some days, and then I went to Thailand, where I would end up being, I think I was there almost a year. Um, and my trip to Thailand actually changed my whole life. And what I have, in looking back on the 8 years that I have been separated, been gone from the United States, I realized that much of what I was doing, much of what I have been doing, what has given me space to be able to, um, what has given me space to be able to heal is the time and energy that I put into writing about what I was going through, finding support for what I was going through, and helping me to be able to process some of the questions and things that I was always coming up with. Um, and doing that has been wholly beneficial. So what does that look like? I wouldn't exactly even call it a grief-cation or a grief vacation. But it was just a matter because I moved away from what I knew to be normal. It just became really easy for me to like there was nothing else for me to do but to heal because the space that I was in um, actually gave way for me to be able to do that. So I wanted to share what were some of the, I guess, some of the benefits of me being able to move abroad and to be able to process grief and what that looks like. So one of the benefits is that moving away actually helped to interrupt a lot of the triggers that I had going on a daily loop. And I didn't even realize this. This is the thing. When you're a person, um, when you are a person who is in a process of healing, you don't always recognize your mental patterns, which is why you need support in order to do it. Journaling could be a good start for you to be able to do your healing work. But for a lot of people, um, you need outside support. You need an outside or a third party to be able to help you um, look at your situation um, on an individual basis, someone from the outside who can actually help you see things that, that are just sort of sitting in your face. Um, and so a lot of the daily environments that you were in before keep painful memories on loop for you. And so particularly with my ex-husband, I remember saying to myself that I didn't like that I was becoming more bitter as a person towards other men. I didn't like that. I didn't like the feeling of being bitter all the time about how men had treated me, how I had allowed men to be able to treat me. And I needed to be able to find new ways to be able to experience um, men being kind, men being loving. Um, and so moving to a new environment helped me to see that in a different way. Traveling kind of changes your sensory inputs, and it allows you to sort of see outside of your usual surroundings. Um, and you kind of you're forced to do that anyway, um, because you're in an absolutely brand new place. And so, you know, I had gone to the UAE at first, which is of course is a totally different environment, and so um, you're always forced to see things differently from a different culture. And you're always asking yourself, is this the right thing to do? Am I doing the right thing? Am I being offensive if I wear this? If I, you're always asking yourself questions about what it is that people are wearing, what are they questions about what they're doing. I went to Thailand and, trying to figure out how to be able to find food that I could eat or was interested in eating. Um, that was a process in and of itself, because at the time I used food to be able to sort of soothe myself. I use food to be able to soothe, feelings of sadness or loneliness or boredom. Um, and in a place where you can't really figure out how to be able to order food, whether you were ordering food on an app, that was kind of challenging to be able to figure out. Um, you can go outside and you can get food, but I don't speak Thai. And so it was, how do I think? We're like, what do you order? Because they didn't really, they don't, especially for street vendors, they don't necessarily always have a menu. So you got to tell them what you want. Um, so that in and of itself was a process. So being able to use my old triggers, which was being able to use the old things that I used to use to be able to, sort of make myself feel good, like pizza and Chinese food. I couldn't do that, because you couldn't find the food that you wanted. Um, so moving abroad helped to interrupt the triggers that you sort of naturally had on loop. It interrupts the triggers. And so you start to ask different questions about what a particular memory means to you. Um, how did you react to this memory? How did you get into this place in the first place where you've even allowed yourself, excuse me, where you've even allowed yourself to be even treated in this way? That was a question that I started to ask further along down the line. But yeah, just having a place to be able to interrupt your triggers, I think is important. Next, putting myself in a more natural environment. I think I've always kind of grown up in a more cityfied place. Um, not a lot of opportunity to be able to go and spend time, with trees, um, at a lake, at a in a park. Not that those things aren't available, but I wasn't immersed in it all the time. And so when I moved to Thailand, maybe less so in the UAE, because the UAE is more of a desert environment. It's a city built in the desert. But in Thailand, when I lived in Chiang Mai in particular, the neighborhood that I lived in was literally in a forest. And so I had access to places that I would hang out would be um, uh, a Buddhist temple that was in the middle of a forest. And this place was absolutely beautiful. I mean, they had places, they made ponds with koi fish, beautiful, brightly colored koi fish in it. These massive trees that were all over the place, and just quiet spaces for you that they built for you to be able to sit just as just yourself as a single person. These little gardens sort of tucked away where you could just sit and quietly meditate, close your eyes, or just sit, be respectful, of course, sit quietly and enjoy the space. And nobody asked any questions about, what are you doing here? Why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. And there were places where monks, I mean, it seemed like there were maybe 100, maybe even a couple hundred of monks. It felt like, um, there would be times where they would gather together in certain places to be able to meditate or chant together. Oh, and the chanting was absolutely beautiful. But I of course, would not insert myself into spaces when it was clear that the space was being used by monks. But you can sit on the outside and sort of watch. They allowed you to sit from on the outside or watch, or just sit anywhere. You can sort of hear it, the sound of the monks chanting in unison, just sort of carried through the trees. Oh my God, it was absolutely beautiful. And to be in this natural environment, um, you'll start to learn that your brain will be allowed to rest, and when your brain is at rest, you have more of an opportunity to process heavy emotions. I hope that makes sense. Um, and so I am, and which is why I hold on to a lot of the um, practices that I learned from being around Buddhists while I was in Thailand and even in Vietnam, for a time, in Cambodia too. Um, I really love that practice of being able to chant and to be able to watch your thoughts. Um, I think in America we never really learn how to be able to just calm down, how to be able to just calm down. And I've spoken to some of the teachers that I've had, some of my meditation and Buddhist teachers, who were Asian from different places, and they kind of get annoyed by Americans who want to turn meditation into sort of like a wellness thing. Um, it kind of pisses them off, and I get it. I can get why. However, if you are an American who has so much grief, so much hurt and overwork, um, fatigue that's sort of packed on your back, you gotta get rid of that stuff first before we can get into the more intricate um, and before we can get into the more intricate details of what Buddhism or what meditation is really supposed to be about. Um, And so I kind of accepted the fact that I have to create my own thing, my own process. And of course, I had other people who were able to help me. Of course, I found people who sort of understood where I was coming from. When I went to Thailand, I actually worked with other Black men who had moved to Thailand themselves and created their own wellness businesses, so to speak. Um, and in that process, I found people who saw me and they understood me and they knew why I was there and the type of work that I wanted to be able to do. So, being in this natural environment really helped me to be able to learn how to turn stuff off in my mind. And even now, as I live in Mexico. At this point, I live in Mexico right now, and I just find it so hard to be able to turn stuff off, to be able to get away from technology, to just be able to sit. Now, I don't live that far from the beach, but I'll be honest, the beach here in Playa del Carmen is not as separated as I would like it to be. It just doesn't feel calm. The beach here is more of a tourist place. Can't say this for all the beaches in Mexico. Perhaps there are some other places that are more calming, but the beach here is more of a party. Let's hang out and play loud music and drink beer, which is cool. Do you? But I really miss living at the beach when I was in Vietnam. Not that folks in Vietnam didn't party, but there was time and space for the beach to sort of be calming, to be enjoyable, and there were a couple of Buddhist temples in the area, and there was what is her name? There was the statue of the woman I forget her name, but she's the goddess of the Lady of Compassion or the Goddess of Compassion, um, who overlooked the sea and the fishermen as they were out doing doing fisherman things. And so being able to immerse yourself in a natural environment is a way for you to be able to process grief. That's my point. Um, so if you are organizing a grief-cation or just time away, um, think about putting yourself in a place where the environment is a little bit more natural than what you're probably used to. Someplace where you can put the phone away, even if it's just for a few hours in the morning. A few hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the morning, and a couple of hours in the evening. I think that matters. Like even when I, did my short trips in Delaware, and I would bring my computer and all that other stuff, but I would sit with my paints and do my paint by number that I talked about. Being able to sit and do my paint by number, I think I might have some sort of a jazz station going on in the background, and to be able to just relax and not have everything be so serious for a time. Give your brain a minute to be able to calm itself. It's almost like, and I'm not a neurologist or anything. I'm not a doctor, nowhere near it. But I really think that some of the things that we put ourselves through sort of adds inflammation to your brain, to your body, and you never get an opportunity to relax. It's not always the food that gives us the inflammation. A lot of times it's what we think and what we experience. And then what we eat is a reaction to to what it is that we are experiencing. So it's not just the food that's giving you inflammation. It's also, the fact that you're stressed and you never have an opportunity to be unstressed. That adds to it. Um, and it sort of adds, it sort of stacks itself over years and years and years. And really, that's how, at least for me, I can speak for myself, how I became how I became overweight, gained well over 100 pounds more than what I should have weighed. And so putting yourself in a natural environment where you have less of this stuff, giving yourself the time to decompress is a nice way to be able to exist. Let's see, the third thing, and I think I've sort of talked about this a little bit already, but just have dedicated time for your own personal contemplation. Just being away from the responsibilities of your daily life, where you have uninterrupted time for your journaling, for your reflecting, and really just allowing your emotions to surface naturally. I think if you're a person who journals, um, and maybe you don't necessarily have a process that you journal, you sort of go into you might go into a robotic mode. So I'm just gonna, you know 3 to 5 things I'm in gratitude for today. One, two, three, four, five. You close the journal and you go to bed. Um, maybe if you don't have a lot of time, you're juggling a lot of stuff. Maybe if you have a family, you gotta clean the kitchen, you got, dirty clothes sitting in a pile, and you gotta go to work tomorrow, and that needs to get done. You gotta help the kids with homework, you gotta go grocery shop. There's a lot of stuff that you need to get done. And so journaling might be the only 5 to 10 minutes that you are able to give yourself right now. Um, that you're allowed, that you feel like you're allowed to be able to give yourself right now. But taking a grief-cation, grief vacation, even if it's just for a day, for an afternoon, gives you some sort of dedicated time to be able to really think about um, what it is that you are grieving. What do you need to be able to give yourself space to be able to grieve? What is hurting right now? Our culture, the American culture, doesn't really give us space um, to be able to think about or to be able to express what hurts us. There's just a thing that happens, and we get in the car and we keep on, we sort of run over it because we got to move to the next goal, the next thing. And that's to our own detriment, because 5, 10, 20 years down the line, there's so many things that you have neglected to focus on that um, there's just so many things that you have neglected to be able to speak on, and it that has it takes a toll on your body and your spirit. And so in that process, we wonder why we come up with things. Why, you might be a person who is always sick. Like I used to be a person who caught colds a lot. Um, and they could, just be because I picked up a cold from somewhere. But I also think our thoughts, our emotions, um, sort of affect our immune system. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. Um, because I know folks always want to know. But I'm not a doctor. I'm a writer, um, and I believe in metaphysics, and I believe in metaphysics. And so, I think that how it is that you live your life is going to affect, the things that you attract in your life. I honestly think what you're thinking attracts whether or not you end up with, certain types of diseases in your life. Certain events, it those things, it attracts. And so if you take the time to be able to decompress, to have some sort of dedicated contemplation time and thinking about this, you will start to learn um, that it's healthy for you to be able to have some of these emotions come to the surface naturally in its own time. Back when I was just doing the short trips, I don't think I like that wasn't enough for the emotions for me to be able to come up. I needed more space. I needed more time. However, doing those things, like going away and being able to paint and to be able to journal and just writing stuff and just having space where I wasn't arguing all the time. That gives you some sort of downtime. I learned that I needed more downtime to be able to relax, to be able to let some of that information from all the arguments and things, um, to be able to sort of come down naturally. And then finally, taking a grief-cation encourages a level of self-compassion, which I think is important to be able to help you to focus on the present moment and offer a healthy reprieve from all the overthinking, um, and just being able to indulge in being with your own company. A moment to be able to indulge in self care. And, the self care at that time was really, I had a particular scrub that I liked and hardly ever freaking used. And so I brought that particular scrub with me. I like the smell of rosemary and tea tree. And so I had this like a salt scrub, some sort of a salt scrub. You can use any, whatever brand it is that you use. That's what I like. I like rosemary. I like sort of woodsy, flowery scents. You might be a fruity girl, and that's cool. But I like to be able to use that um, just as a way to be able to indulge in just taking care of myself. And while that's not the whole of what self-care is about, it's a nice way into the doorway. Take a few moments to be able to scrub yourself properly, and have offer your body just some appreciation for what it's been able to bring you through. I think that's really important. So that's really all I wanted to share. Um, just the whole thought of a grief-cation, um, whether or not you have taken one before, do you need more time? Um, how can you add this to your journaling practice, to your life? And I realize that everybody can't pack up and move abroad like I have. Totally get that. Um, but how can you do it where you are? Can you do a short weekend somewhere? Can you, if you have children and you need someone to take the kids for a few hours, over the weekend, can you do that? Um, But yeah, just find ways to be able to help yourself process grief. Um, so just ask yourself in your journal when you sit down today, what do I have to grieve? What's what's sitting heavy on my heart that I haven't really addressed in my life? I think is a really good, worthwhile um, journaling question that you can sort of ask yourself. Um, and you take that question and really you can sit with it. You can do a few days of answering that question, really. Don't think that you can take these journaling questions, you answer it once and you're done. This is why I love journaling so much. It's because you have uh, an initial answer, and then as time goes by, you'll find that you have deeper answers the further along you'll go. And as I always like to say, when you find these things, um, certain things that feel a little bit more difficult, that you need a bit more someone to help you lift the heavy things, find support from somewhere. It could be therapy, it could be a coach. Um, yeah. In my Substack, as I have a Substack, I have a one of the things that I've recently written was a post about remembering the last time my mom cooked for me. It just to short, in short, my mom passed away when she was 49 in 2006. I just turned 49, and so I'm spending some time thinking about the lessons that I have been learning um, in my 40s. And I want to be able to document them in my Substack um, up until I turned age 50. My mom did not make it to age 50. And so this is significant for me. To be 49 years old and to be planning to go live my life at the same time when my mom was preparing for death. In some ways, it's a celebration, but it also it holds some grief for me, and so I'm expressing that grief through writing and remembering how the food that she made for me in a way of teaching me self-care. I look at it as one of her last ways of being able to demonstrate self-care as a mother and being able to show love and support to me before she lost the ability to be able to do so for herself. Um, I talk about that in my Substack, and at the end of that, I ask you some questions that you can use in your own journaling practice. So I invite you to take a look at that. If you'd like to become a regular patron of that, um, you're welcome to do that. I also do uh, manuscript reviews. If you do memoir or if you do some sort of nonfiction, I do not review fiction books, but if you do memoir or some type of nonfiction, I do offer manuscript reviews, and you'll find all of that in my Substack. I'll leave my email address in the description below if you'd love to be able to get a hold of an appointment to be able to work with me. So that's it. You can catch me online, halana.substack.com, and I will see you soon. Peace.